Cheers. Everybody here is a friend of Glen's, I'm sure. But yet he called me today and he said, I want an introduction. And I don't really know what one says about the greatest architect in the world. Anyway, it's a little, it's sort of other than here's Glen, but you know, for Glen has been very near and dear to me all these years. He was really, I'm going to get a little more sentimental here. He was really one of the causes of our starting SCI-Arc. He was really the one who started the uprising at Cal Poly, along with Bernard Zimmerman, and that drove all the students to this frenzy. I think he gave them rum and coke at that time too. And there was a big cause celeb, and all of a sudden we ended up over here and started SCI-Arc. And I've always had a very close, you know, attachment to Glen. And I do really feel that he's one of the finest designers in the world. And I think he cares about a lot of issues. One of the few faculty members here who really does. He cares about ecology and environment and social issues and all those things. And on top of all that, I think he also likes to make money. So here's Glen.
Well, I'm glad you all came. I was worried, that's why I called a lot of you. But I've been working down in Nicaragua for about 1.5 years, and what I'll do this evening is I'll try to explain how I got there and what it's like there and what I'm doing there. So why don't we begin with the slides, much more visually oriented at this moment. I hope you're all good and socked out there. Where are we? Oh, we got these slides here. What, can you, oh yes. I actually like flowers better than people. That's my problem. So I think they're much more, you know, they smell nicer, and they're much more beautiful. So I take a lot of pictures of flowers. Let's see. Okay. Now, this is my first experience out of really being away from middle-class America. I was raised in middle-class America, and I'm a product of that. And so this third world experience was was something quite new for me. And I find myself, you know, in a situation where I feel we're internationals, and I think the world is international, and that actually Nicaragua in a lot of ways is very nationalistic, which I find a little upsetting because the gringo is not always appreciated. So I want everybody to relate to the world as one, right? Okay. These are my little tidbits of negativism. Okay, I was warned by Melissa not to talk too negatively, but in the LA Times today there was this article on the front page of this biosphere, and Greg Davis is actually working on the with Peter Pierce on the space frame of it. But I was interested in the fact that in about 1965 I started thinking along these lines, a much more grandiose level, the biomorphic biosphere, you know, and that's where I feel, I'm not going to go into these things because you all know them, but just for those that are new to the audience, this was a city complex that was self-sufficient and trying to make a minimum taxation on the world. And so I didn't get anywhere with that. And yeah, I like the images a little bigger. Can we make the... Can't you take the zoom and make it bigger or not? The reason I went to one slide versus two slides, I always like them big, so that's why I want the whole screen filled up. All right. Now this, you know, that's, you know, Ray, didn't we used to fill the screen up? All right. So from the biomorphic biosphere, I went to the green machine, which was another direction of sort of being very ecological, but very small scale. Now I was getting down to Pat Russell's scale, and I thought we had a chance, and that didn't come through. So I've been rejected, is what I'm telling you. I was rejected on the big scale, rejected on the small scale, and now this thing, you know, this South Park, which, who is the Lawrence Halpern, who did a very beautiful, I don't know if you've seen this thing in Portland, beautiful fountains and park and everything. Now he's come to our city and he's proposed for South Park this thing. Well, anyway, with the students a couple years ago, we did this, I thought, was a very interesting turf town for the same site, you know. So what did we get? A rejection again from the city of Los Angeles. All right. Okay. Well, this is what I'm doing now in Los Angeles. I'm doing a house on Mulholland, and I'm doing a condo project in Santa Monica with a very nice client, Grant Water. He's here. And then I'm doing, and it has roof gardens on the top that we're still fighting for, and we hope to keep them, and we have a sympathetic contractor that says he'll preserve them. So anyway, then we're doing something at the beach, a remodel for Edmund Cohen's property, this artist studio thing. And now, why sort of this middle class, adventuresome type person that's been rejected in LA ends up in Nicaragua, right? Why does this happen? Well, this guy's, I've been teaching for 18 years, you know, and the guy on the right there, Roger Luitas, was a student of mine in Europe, actually got thrown off the train, I think between Switzerland and somewhere else, because he had 2 passports and he probably could produce 3 if you asked him. So he sort of related to me in some way. I mean, it's like, be nice to your students, right? And he was a nice guy. So, but he asked me to go down to Nicaragua. Well, his uncle turned out to be the Minister of Tourism, okay? And it wasn't like, it was through the student's recommendation that I got the job. This is Merhan Ashad. He's right here. That's the way he looked in Nicaragua. Anyway, so that's the way things happen. Didn't on Channel 28 they had some whole thing on public television of connections? And all right, they'll talk about this in the years to come. All right, this is Herdy Luides, who's the uncle, and he's a very interesting person. I think to get a project done, you got to have a interesting client. You got to have somebody with something behind them, and Herdy's a real go-getter. Actually, he was in Terminal Island during the overthrow of Somoza for gun running. In other words, he actually ran guns down to the rebels in Nicaragua to overthrow Somoza. And he was caught out here, I think in Torrance or someplace like that, with some truck with all his stash inside the double walls and so of arms and equipment and ammunition. And so he's a person that takes risks, you might say. He's a person that has been sort of had some hard knocks and so on, but now he finds himself in a position of great importance in Nicaragua. He's, I would say, he's very, very dedicated, very honest, but at the same time, I would say he's a capitalist in a lot of ways. Although he is definitely working for the Sandinistas. Now, what bothers me about some of everything you read, the Marxist, Leninist government of Nicaragua. I mean, the LA Times keeps repeating it's like a record that's broken. And it bothers me about that because it's not. It's a mixed economy, and that's what they profess, and you have mixed people working at it. Tourism is the 5th largest generator of money for Nicaragua. The U.S. dollars are very important. There's an embargo against that we've set up against Nicaragua, so in essence it's very hard for them to run their trade and things like that. And so Herdy's dream is to develop tourism. And what I'll show you now is sort of a series of images that you see around Nicaragua. This is probably the most dramatic one. This is a new statue, and it's like, has a, what is it, a pick, and then also a rifle at the same time. And the idea is that you have to defend, you're given your land, but then you have to defend your land. And they waste a lot of time defending their land. That's what the problem is right now. We have a war against them. And Herdy's has done projects that, in other words, before Herdy became Minister of Tourism, they didn't have an idea of how to sort of have recreation of any scale nationally in any organized manner. So he's created a series of ocean parks and lake parks and things like that. Very successful, populous. It takes pennies to get into these things. Everyone I've visited on weekends is jammed. There is a certain problem of intoxication and not knowing how to cope with water and a few other things, which goes with a sort of a third world inexperience. This is the, where is this? What do you call this? Hilawa, sorry, yeah. Hilawa, this is a public beach that's been created there by Herdy. Series of, and then Herdy is now going into parks. This is Hinotepe, sort of repainting them, playing games with them. Now he's also going into town. This is Hinotepe, where he's got a deal on white paint. So you can see Actually, it's a byproduct of one of the factories there, and they get it for nothing. So it's sort of a super whitewash. And on the right, you can see the sort of the town as it used to be, and now the new white. But I hope they find the accent color pretty soon because it's going to be deadly. Anyway, this is another white scene. And the city, I mean, the countryside is extremely beautiful. I mean, it's very lush, but you know, the areas I've seen aren't real jungle. It's like Managua is not what you classify as patrol, you know, movie. But out there is a jungle, of course. I haven't been there. And then the horizon is fantastic. A series of volcanoes that rise from the horizon. And it's warm all the time. What was interesting to me, that I always live in California, basically, except for Michigan, Alaska, and a few things like that. But you know, I always thought that we lived in a warm climate. Well, when I came back here the last time, I got cold. I was very cold because after your body seems to become acclimatized to tropical heat and so on. This is sort of cooking outdoors, but this is sort of like your vendor stand of frying bananas. It's right around you. This is my next door neighbor. I'm just giving you this. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with architecture, but I'm trying to get you familiar with the country. This, is that focused or not? He runs a sort of a takeout restaurant in one of the local markets, and his wife works for one of the ministers. I'm not exactly sure of her task. She's a Sandinista, which is a sort of a political party which is in power right now, and then the children, Renee, he plays basketball on the left. Anyway, and then the country itself is, you can see basically what it is. Puerto Rico, Costa Rica is down here, and then Honduras is up there, and El Salvador is over here. And the capital here, right here, is Managua, where I live. The trips down to the beach are this way. I've only done sort of this route. I haven't been very adventuresome, you might say. Then there's a volcano not very far away that keeps spouting out fumes, and that Somoza dropped his political prisoners into from a helicopter. And this is typical transport. This is in the LA Times recently, just the other day, so I took a picture of it. But this is typical bus travel, and then there are a series of religious ceremonies all the time. This is a national sport is baseball, and does very well. New lights for the baseball stadium. Then this is what I got a kick out of this. This is looks like a styrofoam dome that somebody did, and there was about 3 of these sitting around. And so some type of cheap housing. Eventually, it's almost decaying. So you got to think twice before you enter into the third world with architectural innovation, I think. Then this is some housing. Recently, well, actually, this is the only housing that Somoza actually put in from all his money he got, and it's not too good. Then, I did get a picture. This is a Chevron gas station, all right? Chevron, Texaco, Shell, they're all there. And you're saying, well, you know, we're at war. Well, what's the deal? Well, there's money. That's the deal. Somebody's making some money. Then this is it looks like, these big army trucks, but these actually, the youth, like you'd all go out and pick coffee during the high season of coffee to pick the beans. And they get behind it. I mean, it's a very big deal with them. And they go out and they pick coffee. And this is an Esteli, which is in northern. I went up there, and this is a big speech by Ortega and so on. A lot of sort of chanting and rah-rah nationalism. I don't relate to this sort of thing, but it's there, and it seems to be serving a function of drawing people together. Then there's all these murals and things like that around the town, but they've got a housing problem. Managua, it was gone from 400,000 people to 900,000 in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. And it's consequently the whole shantytown system of development. Rather than throwing them off the land, they allow them to exist. They actually bring in electricity and try to bring in water and things like that. So these eventually become neighborhoods of, with utilities and so on. This was some saint thing where the big deal was they had black tar on their hands, you see, and they would come around and they would smear it all over your face. And once you had the black tar on your face, you're okay, and then it wouldn't hurt you any longer. So on. Then this is like in the night, living in the houses they have around there and so on. And then the jungles and so on. Terrain. Yeah, well, I think that's interesting because that's like something Frank Gehry would do, right? You got the natural wood, you got the painted wood, you got so on. And this is a lake with a lot of islands and so on. Let's see. And this was my car. This is what Ray's referring to. I love money. Well, actually, I don't own this car. They had all these, I call them samosa mobiles. They had them all left over from the revolution. The revolution terminated in '79, so they got all the Mercedes that Somoza had. So they're all 79s or 78s or something like that. And they're short on parts. So that was the first car, and that was the first house. This is the second house. By standard of where I live now, in LA and our home, this is a minimal standard. But by their standard, it's very high. It's very luxurious. And then they gave me a new Russian car, a Lada there. It's good. It's the first new car I've had in about 30 years, so I feel very lucky. Of course, I don't own it. They own it, but that's all right. That's that other house. Sort of the local stand. Then you have all these slogans of defend the country and so on. And then the neighborhood kids. Now, what bothers me about our sort of detached feeling towards Nicaragua is that Congress passes, say, $100 million to go help the Contras, and the Contras are actually fighting people. You don't understand. They're actually fighting people. They're people that come out of these neighborhoods, that their sons and their daughters have to go off to this war, and they come back. I pass by a hospital every day on the way to work, and I see all this tragedy of legs gone, arms gone, all these splints and so on, all this result of war, and we're exporting it. So I think my personal feeling on Nicaragua is to leave them alone. Just let them be. They have enough problems as it is without getting involved with trying to push them around. We've had a policy for a number of years to do this, but I totally disagree with it. This is a series of wires. The vegetation is and the water is so much water that things grow on the lines. These are just telephone wires, and they're growing. The vegetation is growing. And then they have their heroes. Sandino is in the middle there, and I remember when I first came to the airport, he looked from a distance like John Wayne. It's like I thought there was a relationship. Anyway, this is sort of a amphitheater. They have some good architecture, a few objects around, but in the distance, over behind, they're building a brand new convention center, which originally I thought I would be doing, but they've had to do it very quickly, and they took an old church to do it, and it's done in a very haphazard way, but they're going to love it. So there's a problem, because I see Nicaragua as virgin territory. There was an earthquake in '72 in the town that just leveled the main city there, and it's like an architect looks at that and they just start saliving at the mouth. All that land. Tell me another capital in the world that has all the land in its center, just vacant, waiting. Anyway, and there are only 100 architects in town. 90% of the professionals left, and they're really hurting for professionals. And there's a lot of youth there, but the youth isn't very experienced, and so on. I was during their Hassenfest got shot down by this kid in the front here. And I actually saw him at a restaurant one night. Came in, and Hassenfest, could be my brother. I mean, probably is. And there was this I got caught doing something wrong because I was paid to do it type of philosophy, which is a mercenary type of thinking. And he really confessed rather fast, and it was a very exciting time. I actually met the lawyer for Hassenfest at the Hotel Intercontinental Bar, and the bar is something like out of Casablanca. It's a bar that you go into, and people are there from all over the world, and you learn something every night. I go there every night. Anyway, so what am I? Point is, this became the image for the and what was interesting in the office, they made a cartoon of me, and I turned out to be Hassenfest, and they turned the boy into Herdy. So Herdy was pulling me around by my neck with a chain. Anyway, but just after that, the minister called me in and he said, Reagan isn't taking too kindly to this person being shot down, and that get ready, something's probably going to come down on Americans in the country. And then just shortly after that, then the Contragate started, which I think saved Nicaragua for a time, because I think Reagan was ready to invade at that moment. This is Roger's brother, Norman. He's a soldier, a Sandinista, and so on, very idealistically oriented. Oops, something didn't drop, I guess. It's a nephew. This is an interesting thing. This is a fence, but it's a growing fence. It's all made out of plants and spaced very close together, so there's no need for any wire or anything like that. It's just a fence. There's Militza, Nicaragua. Oh, I guess I showed that twice. This is a typical house of Roger's grandmother, and it has a central atrium, and it doesn't have any air conditioning, and it's sort of cool, and the breezes go up through the center. Plants, and they have rocking chairs, and the reason they have rocking chairs everywhere is that you actually cool yourself by rocking. Movement of air. The trick is movement of air on very hot, humid climates. These are a couple of kids with one of the machetes. It's a Sunday, and they just been working all day. This is architecture. This was left over from the Somosan days, and this was a bank before, and now it's some Sandinista youth headquarters type thing. It was in Messiah. This is looking out from the Hotel Intercontinental at the Lake Managua, which is out in front of it. Now, originally I went down there with Roger, and I had an idea, because I talked to people like Rick Davison and so on, and seen their pictures, and that I knew that downtown Managua was just level. So the idea was to take the leveled ground and dig out. Well, first take the garbage, start piling the garbage. The mayor, we met with the mayor, and then he had problems with the garbage. Taking the garbage and piling it up and making a series of hills, then digging out ground from the lakes and piling the ground on top of the garbage, and then creating a hemp rope system. This doesn't show very well. Yeah, off in the upper right there, it's sort of a hemp rope tension structure type of structure, with main cables being out of steel, and then letting jungle vines start to take over that whole thing and interact in such a way that they would actually become a skin in themselves. And then as the rope deteriorated and fell away, then you'd be left with the jungle vines as the structure. And it's basically a cheap shade covering to give a new image to the city and then sort of symbolically relate to the volcano shapes around the place. I'm still working on that idea. It hasn't come to fruition. There seems to be, like everything else in the world, there seems to have some politics in town. And it's interesting that a person like myself, who has virtually, I say, no power in Los Angeles, other than a SCI-Arc professorship, which he's dearly trying to hold on to, going down to Managua and meeting with the mayor and the Minister of Tourism, the Minister of Construction, and the Minister of Housing, who virtually control the whole city physically. So it's like just night and day in terms of the impact you can make. So anyway, that was the original scheme for the hotel, but I won't go into it. And then to actually go over the roads with his vines and create archways and things like that as shade. The whole thing in the tropical situation is to get out of the sun. There's an intensity about the sun that you want to get out of, and that this would create sort of a natural shadowed condition that people could sit under and relax. And also give an imagery that you're rebuilding the city, which I think needs to be done, because right now it looks pretty bad. This was the original group that Jerry Sullivan and his daughter and Roger and myself. Jerry's a mechanical engineer. Is he here this evening? Well, anyway, he went down as a consultant, and then so the project started to come down. They actually invited us down to work, and the first thing I did was design a chair. Now, I'm not sure whether this one is still up, but I built about 10 of these, had 10 of these built. Everyone collapsed. Except I'm sitting on one. I have one down my office. I think it's the workmanship. It can't be the design. Anyway. And this is our office, and so on. People. Carlos Valle came down, and Merhan. Is that you there, Merhan? No, who else is there? And Michael Scanlon is there on the right, and Carlos Valle, both SCI-Arc students. So I guess what I'm saying, if you can't make it at SCI-Arc and you want to live dangerously, might make it in Nicaragua. Then our office, this is our office, and I have about a 10-man office, and it's going to go up because the project has been approved and just recently got financed. So, and then there's Pat Conrad. Is that Pat there? And Pat Conrad got married yesterday in Nicaragua. So, hooray. So if you can't find a woman here, and you've been beat up by the woman lib movement, so you go down there, and took him about 6 months. I know. All right. This is the first scheme. Let's see. It was very adventuresome because they were going to do a whole convention center at that time, and it got cut back. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'll get further into it when I get to the final scheme. It was covering the whole lot. It was a convention center and a lot big office buildings and a hotel and so on. And then it got shrunken a little here, and the parking. Anyway, and this is a slide where this kid was coming along the street as I was taking pictures of the last model, and this is the system. I mean, you got a push cart on your left, and then you got this thing on your right. I mean, that is of another era. So there's a dichotomy of that is happening in the country at the same time. This is the latest scheme, and the idea is that the big element on your right there is the Hotel Intercontinental, and that is the hotel in town. And the government owns 70% of it. It's run by Intercontinental, and they wanted to double the size. It is the place to stay in town. So, and they wanted to have sort of small conventions and so on. This is the siting. It has a very nice site. It's at the base of a hill. It's a caricature of a Mayan pyramid. I mean, it's just something that Somoza had in his mind. He wanted this sort of imagery, and it's like a cartoon. It's sort of weird. So because it's weird and it's strange, that was my rationality to sort of take off from it. In other words, don't ignore it, but play with it. And the scheme basically starts with an angle that is complementary to the slope of the existing hotels here. And 67% of the rooms stack. You can't tell that, but they stack all the plumbing stacks and everything. And the game is played with the balconies and sliding the units forward and back. And this particular road, you're coming around and it sort of sweeps you towards the vista of the lake. And this is the prominent vista in the situation. This is on the opposite side, the other vistas. Well, this is the, is that focused or not? Yeah. This is the plaza in the middle. It's I call it the Peace Plaza, but I just named it. I decided one day I'd name it the Peace Plaza. I don't know how long it's going to be called that. Because they name all their stuff after heroes of the revolution and so on. But I was more interested in something that would be not so definable in that direction. So this is the plaza is a hard edge plaza. In other words, it's a very flexible thing. In other words, canopies can be put up and a series of different functions can be on it. So it'd be going from speeches and things like that all the way to a marketplace situation, sort of like the European plazas like in Venice and Verona, and Siena, and so on, where you take an element that is hard and then it becomes a maximum flexible space. And also the plaza would be used a lot at night, so you'd be looking out at and that's downtown, you see. There's only one high-rise in all of Managua. that was the Bank of America. But it stood up during the earthquake. And what they sort of overreacted after the earthquake, and they just tore down the majority of the buildings. This is the other wing. We got two wings here. One is on your left and one is on your right. And the program was such that you couldn't block the views of the rooms from the existing that look out towards the lake. So that's why it opened up naturally with this U plan. And basically, the main drag is along here, and visually it moves you up through this terrace element to the plaza here, and the parking is all underneath. I mean, not the parking, but the drop-off space. So it's all protected. You can come in and go under. So you have a separation of pedestrian and vehicle. Pedestrian being on the top. Then there's a system of canopies that move up here to another terrace. And underneath that is the entry that moves up to a new lobby in this area. These are sort of presidential suites off these terraces that look out at the lake. So there's 16 of those. It sounds very commercial, right? Doesn't it, Ray? But it's very radical for Managua. I mean, it's actually, I think this is a very radical building. So there's let's see, the idea was to hold this wing down lower, in other words, and still contain the element and bring this wing up higher. So when you're looking this way, this becomes the backdrop and this becomes the suite. So then this is enclosed in there. Then out the underside, there's two functions. One is a theater here and one is a very flexible multi-convention center type thing here. And they feed into this intercourt here, which then feeds out into the parking lot with streets. I spent a lot of time on this this rotation, moving from a rather flat element and then coming out and then coming back and then turning up to that. These are the effect underneath. There's a hot and cool space. And the hot space is on the top. The cool space is underneath. And you enter the cool space and you have a whole series of slot lighting. In other words, it's coming, which is the derivative of the rib width here that goes across the plaza. And you're underneath. Then there's a series of these light shafts that are coming down into that area. Looks into a very planted, lush garden, and this fountain, dripping, and all that. And all the water from the structure comes down through here through a series of rivers and puddles and ponds, and down eventually to a park down in here, which is a public park. The idea is that the building is a terrace mountain. Again, similar to a lot of other schemes I've done. It's very definable that actually you can walk up the whole top of the building on either side and walk down. There's a bar to the spot.
Is this all like precast?
We have, Nabi Youssef actually is here, and he was very generous with his time, and he came down and spent some time trying to work this thing out structurally. One of the problems was when the local engineers looked at this, they had a horror in their eyes. I mean, it's like it was all going to fall down in an earthquake. And so Nabi came down, and about 3 days he had patched it all up and got everybody feeling it was going to stand up, and so on, which was a big element because it is all concrete. That's the way it's thought of it, and whether it's precast or whether it's poured in place and all that stuff is still in the works. What the latest is, and I think they're going to do it because they can reuse the system. They have systems now that actually the formwork goes into a pocket or a square like that. Then it expands out like that, it creates the box. Then it collapses in on itself and it pulls out. It's like a form. It goes in like this and pulls out like that. And that's what they're talking about using. The Belgians are furnishing it. Comes through East Germany, but there's a lot of others, and I think they're pricing one against the other. The Ministry of Construction is very excited about the possibility of having this formwork, and they can reuse it in housing and things like that. Let's see. This is the whiz-bang picture. This is the way you'd see it as you're coming up in the terracing. And now I feel, about architecture that it has to hit you. It's got to sock you. You can't go up and say, "Isn't that a curious little bent piece of steel running up there? Now what's that for?" Or this rusted element dangling over here. Isn't that cute? I don't like that, and I don't get off on it. I think you gotta have something that the public comes up to, that drives up to, that starts moving them, gets them into the motion, and they become part of the building. And as they experience the building unfolds on them, and they can relate to it. It's not all that complicated. And that's the type of architecture I want. So, being of that nature, I was trying to, this is a very commercial world. We're dealing with a hotel here. So the game became playing with the ends of the ribs by shifting the angle and extending the balcony wider or narrower. That was the whole thing, and you can get the movement with this pattern that way. So on. And I felt also it tied in with the existing structure. I mean, what are you going to do with a pyramidal cartoon, And so I thought my attitude towards remodel is always one of not destroying it, but trying to complement it. And I think if you take that attitude, you usually can come up with something. Now this is the different parts. This is a new swimming pool. I'll just talk to you like I talk to a client. When you swim in swimming pools, all these kidney-shaped pools, you get lost and things like that. So, but I always, like the shape of the pool. So this is cool. You make the end parallel, right? So you can swim laps, right? But on the side, you get great sensuality if you want by varying that. We had another problem with the stair system. We had an interior that was stepping, so the rooms were sliding at the end. Basically, the building was standard from about 2 bays in to about 2 bays down from the end down there. But the ends were very accentuated to get the flare. And so you have this terrace condition. So this stair becomes that element that complements that and goes into that angle. So it had to move off in this direction. This is the canopy system. I see a whole series of canopies moving out into the Plaza and so on and so back and modulate and so on. This was a hole, like if you lots of red if you've been there, where the shafts of light are coming down and hitting these prayer areas underneath. And that's the sort of thing you hit. You have these openings that would be very intense with sunlight coming down, and then rather than just making a hole, you make a whole seating element based on this sort of spiral element, and you start to play games with those, and then you create the planting in relationship to those things. And I'm working with a little bit of, sod on the roof. It's not a big deal in the U.S. now, but it's a big deal down there. And, so I'm trying to introduce that in as an element to the roof. This is the park at the base where all the water comes in this big shoulder park down in here. This is going rather rapidly. I always think I'm going to say more. This is a big flexible convention space. And it's all modulated. Just pull across on the ribs and divide up these elements here. Now, the basic idea on the wings was actually to use the system that I think it's a stick. Is it a pointer? Okay. This element in here is a central atrium, and that was based, like I mentioned before, on the domestic housing. To try to demonstrate on a large-scale building, this is only 5 stories high, but they consider this a very big building. And the lateral bracing, you might be interested in that, is this bathroom core down through here. This element here and here. In other words, all these bathroom cores start to act as 2 big long ribs that come on either side, and they all brace the lateral in the direction of opposite the main structural element. They have this, and that, and that, and that. Well, anyway, the central atrium starts to break up the monotony of just a big slab building. And so we're trying to bring in the natural ventilation up through the top of this baby, and this goes all the way around and connects to the lobby of the hotel. This is also on this side. And what we're going to do is take the water from the rain, it's prevalent during the rainy season anyway, and drop it down through this as well, and let it off. This is the big, I think when you arrive at a tropical country, you expect to have tropical planting and all that stuff. So that's what this is. This is a miniature jungle. You get out and you walk up the stairs. The water actually comes over your head and drops down into this pool there. That's when it's raining. Otherwise, then the movement is up through these elements and over into this major lobby, which had to be low. And the patterning of the major lobby was tropical. In other words, it used a series of these curves, which I think are basically, if you got a flower print or something like that, that's what you can see. And so I developed these in this whole series of to build on it. This is a bar back in here, and then this is a seating, borrowing. Hotels are borrowing space from one another. Rather than creating rooms, they create spaces that you can expand out into the lobby or pull back in, so you could have dining out in the lobby or pull back into the cafe, and then you had a different one over dining over here, and you look out into the swimming pool here. This is the theater down here. As you move through it, you can start to see it's a slight curve as you're moving around, and it's terminated with a theater at this end, it's terminated with a convention center at this end. And you're moving in this sort of circular pattern as you come back on. So this is obviously the roof has been removed on this part as well. That's the stair I talked about in the pool. I don't know. I think I would like to talk now about, before we get into questions, about my political feelings of Nicaragua and what it's like being an architect down in there, down in Nicaragua. I live a totally elitist life. You know, it's like, I don't know if you've ever been a technician, but I'm a technician. You know, you go to a foreign country, I don't speak the language very well, but even the people that in our group that does, they do, they're treated as technicians. Everybody's treated as a technician. So it's not one of embracing, you know, U.S. sort of has a melting pot system. I don't feel that in Nicaragua. I feel it's more of a country that is very proud and is very hesitant about bringing other people into its country. You can't just go down there and live. In other words, you have to go there and have something that you want to contribute, which I think is worthwhile. I mean, that's a good policy. In other words, in a strange way, they've created a country which is the idealist capitalist hangout. In other words, you can live like a king for about $400 a month. I mean, you would just forget your worries of the next bank payment and all that stuff up here, and you could go down there and live. But they won't let you do that. You have to go down there and be constructive in whatever you're going to do. Now, they threw out a tyrant, in other words, a dictator, and they were making progress in terms of organizing their economy and putting together an experimental type of government. Then we developed a policy where we were going to stop communism in the New World, or whatever it is. And we've created an embargo, we've created an army to fight them, and it's raising all sorts of problems with them. I think even if we wanted to turn them around, in other words, and I don't feel this way myself, but if I was Reagan, which I think Reagan's a good conservative, you know, he really loves capitalism in every aspect, right? And if he really wants to win the war, I would think he would say, all right, we're going to open up all trade with Nicaragua, we're going to make cultural exchanges, we're going to give them all our goodies. In no time at all, they will be totally submerged in our materialism. And I think they would probably, to a large extent, accept a lot of it. Not the leaders. I think the leaders are basically idealistic. I think they're very noble. I think they're trying to experiment. They're trying to educate people on a sharing basis and things like this. But you know, we are one world. We're in this world that is functioning in a different manner. So it's very difficult to try to create this harmony of interchange. It could be compared to almost Christianity. I mean, if you took Christianity and went back and said the roots of Christianity might be a form of communism, in other words, of sharing, looking out for your buddy and all that. But it's very difficult for human nature to accept this, because I think human nature is basically materialistically oriented and wants a little more than the next guy and so on, and seems to be oriented that way. Cuba's had a very difficult time and is still relying on the Soviet Union for its economy. So I think Nicaragua is sort of trying to do something there in between. It's trying to do a mixed economy. And so you have a minister like Herdy Luitas actually that is creating dollar stores and hotels and things like this to make a certain amount of attraction to bring in money. And that's the way the world functions. And much as I personally don't agree with that, you know, because I have all these very noble schemes of everything being shared, but I feel that maybe the world doesn't function that way. And so I think what should be done is a policy of just letting them try it, letting them try to work this dual economy, letting them try to work it out, see how far they can go. They have free elections and things like that, so if it doesn't work, they're obviously going to turn it around in some other way. So as far as myself being there, as Ray said, I have certain interests, and I'm not exactly sure whether this project falls in all the interests that I have. One is in the technology of our age, which this building, I would say, probably is, 20 years old in a way, because they don't really have the facilities to do a real experimental thing. Then, in terms of ecology, you can see the place is a jungle. So the inroads I've made in that is I feel that we're trying to do something with the natural ventilation as an air conditioning element, and it's trying to do something with our water system. And as far as social element, I feel right on in there. I feel that this is an experiment. It's exciting to be there. I'm glad I'm with the Sandinistas. I'm a consultant for them. I feel good about that. And as far as the pizzazz goes, I think the building's got, in the last category, which is aesthetics, I think the building's got a lot of that. And I think the people that would experience it would like it. So it falls into that category. As far as the future of Nicaragua, or what you can do in a country like that, I don't know. Maybe if you get one project up, it functions, people like it, there might be a call for another, something like that. It was interesting. Recently, we had the president of Intercontinental for all of Latin America, which was looking at the project, and he said that he felt that the project would be the best hotel in all of Latin America if it was built. I said, right on, brother. But actually, if you saw him, I think he was out of Colombia. Yeah, he was out of Colombia. And he was totally into the whole hotel world. He wasn't, what you say, a Sandinista in any way. So it came from a neutral source, I guess. There's been some interesting ramifications of being in Nicaragua, and that is a certain amount of jealousy has arisen among the local architects. I was asked about a month ago, before I left, to give a lecture, and I said, well, yes, I can give a lecture, and I expected the lecture to be about a month away. Well, about a week later, the same person said, well, could you give the lecture tonight? And it was a Friday night, and I said, my God. And so, okay, I said. Well, about noontime, I guess, it came on the Sandinista radio that Glen Small, architect for the Hotel Intercontinental, was giving a lecture, and Zambrano, the local sort of AIA president there, they don't have an AIA, but the local Architects Association president, was going to criticize the project. It sounded pretty negative to me. So I ran over to the minister and I said, I'm being set up, And he says, no, they're just trying to get to me. In other words, they're trying to get to Herdy. He says, just don't reveal too much. So I go back, and I knew I could kill him with my work, right? I've got history of work that goes on and on and on for hours. By the time I get done with that, they would be all dead, and So I started out showing them this and that, but ironically, about 30 minutes into the lecture, the slide projector bulb went out. And then I had a backup bulb. I'm a Virgo. I'm a very conscientious person. And I had a backup bulb, but the backup bulb wouldn't work either. And then I was supposed to bring rum and Coke, and the rum and Coke had not arrived yet either. And so they sort of broke up. And by the time the spare projector had come, about 20, 30 minutes later, they'd all gone home. So they'll probably be waiting for me when I get back to Nicaragua. But what it is that it's, and it happens here in this town, Izasaki and so on. You got the locals that are hungry and they want to do a project, and then you got some guy that comes in and says, all right, here's your building for you. So, and it's the first major building in Nicaragua, although they're doing that convention center, and I personally am not very satisfied with the results design-wise on the convention center they're doing. So I look at my role as not one of aggressively shoving something down their face. I look at it as a way of trying to hopefully raise the standard of their thinking and encourage them to go in a direction. Because in a way, some people have mentioned it to me, it's easier for somebody from the outside to come in and propose something quite different than what they're normally going to do, and therefore then get them excited. I work for a company of the government that actually does a lot of hotels, and so I've noticed that the drafting room upstairs has a miniature one of these now going down on another project and things like that. So things are going to be influenced and changed and so on, things like that. Are there any questions? Yes?
I have one. Does the government do anything about housing for the poor people up there, or we have to consider how much housing we have to provide to the budget like this?
Well, that's a two-pronged question. One, the first part of the question is the Sandinista government interested in housing, and definitely they are. And they've been working at it rather diligently, but they haven't produced. In other words, I'm not exactly sure why, but they haven't produced. They've done some of the housing, and it's usually outside of the city. But the city, Managua, I haven't seen any results of housing being done. I think they're going to, but you know how it is, like some people are action people and other people are not, and the Minister of Housing doesn't seem to be an action person, you know? And which is interesting because he's very intellectually oriented. And then you take Herdy, which is my boss, who just gets things done. I mean, he builds a lot of things. So I don't think it's a matter of whether they want to. I think they all want to. It's a matter of maybe who's controlling it and who's directing it, and if they can pull it together. The second part of the question is, why not use the money that's going to be built in the hotel to do housing? Well, housing in itself is not a money generator. And the problem is generating money, as the minister sees it. He can generate money, he can build housing. If you're not generating money, you can't do very much at all. And so it's like if you're going to donate, if you're going to get some money from some other country or something, maybe you could do some housing. But the money here is almost run like a business. They're getting a loan from the Italians, and they're going to build the building, and there's going to be a payback, and the whole thing, da 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 da. So it's not really costing the country money. It's actually carrying its own, and hopefully it will pump money back into the society. And that's the way it's projected. But at the same time, there seems to be a certain amount of individuality in the ministers and things like that, which I'm actually, in my little way, trying to circumvent it. I've met with the mayor, and I know the construction minister, and I know the minister of tourism and so on. And I would like them to come together so they can plan the city in some rational way together, rather than run their 4 different departments separately and not be connected, because I think they all have common interests. I'm sure they're all interested in housing, and I'm sure all are interested in making the place more livable and so on. So if they could start to interact, we might get some results. But they're all good people. Like the mayor is, was very active in the revolution and so on. They all respect each other, but at the same time, politics. They just, wherever you go, there's politics. There's politics at SCI-Arc. There's politics everywhere. Politics at the building. Oh, forget it. Okay. Another question?
Is most of the Nicaraguan architects go to school in Mexico, or do they have their own schools down there?
They have their own schools. But they do get educated elsewhere as well. It's your economical bracket, status bracket. Not very many people. See, an architect down there gets about $50 a month. So why go to Nicaragua, right? And that's working for the government, okay? And the government has the big projects. The private enterprise people, they don't get the big projects. And so if you want to do big projects, you work for the government. And the whole attitude is you got to get behind what the country's doing. If you don't have the spirit and want to sacrifice your time in doing it, then you leave the country. And 90% of them have left, and I'd say another 1 to 5% of the professionals are thinking of leaving. I got this Miami Herald, which is a reactionary paper, but I get it's a lot of news on Latin America, and I get it every day. And I had it in my office one day, and there was this engineer in the office, and he looks at this paper and he says, "Can I read this?" And I said, "Sure." And I didn't know what he was going to do. I thought maybe he was going to look at the front page and go through it like normally. He rips it back to the one ads, man. Man, do they want me in Miami? That was his reaction. So, I don't know. You got to be sort of in a different space to want to work there. I guess that's what I'm saying.
So $50 a month is pretty tough to live on,
It's pretty tough. They have no one's starving. There's just a different, the government has a series of distribution stores, sort of like your mom's and pop's grocery store that you go and you have these coupons and you get everything at a real discounted rate, about half the price that you would at the normal market you'd go to. And people exist, and they can live off of it, and no one's starving. But at the same time, if you want to live at a higher standard right now, it's very difficult. So that makes people uneasy, the ones that want more. Actually, one of the guys in my office said he wanted some shirt or something. He wanted me to bring something to him or something from the States. And I said, well, don't you have any shirts? And he says, yeah. He says I guess every 2 months he can go in and buy a shirt. And he gets it almost for nothing. I mean, it's very cheap. And I say, well, isn't 6 shirts a year enough for you? And, nah, he wants more shirts. So, and I don't know. If you have, if you just have this attitude that you want 6 shirts a year, that's enough, or whatever it is. Well, I look at myself, man. This shirt is, I think, about 7 years old. Okay, so, and my daughters gave me this tie, so that's nothing. You see, but anyway. So it's just the standard of living you want to live at. If you have if you got to have a lot, then that's not the place for you. So, I mean, in terms of living off the salary, the private enterprise they get much more money, but the projects are very small. There's a whole sort of I would say upper class that still is hanging on, and it has a lot of money. They have their bank accounts outside the country, and they just live off the interest, and they live like kings. I mean, they literally live like kings. A maid down there costs about $15 a month. Anyway, what's that have to do with anything? Goes it? I think it's 50% of their money goes in there. What? Their CIA? Oh yeah, to fight. Well, it's not. There's a legitimate army of the Contras. I mean, it's ex-Somosan people. I mean, they're people, and they've got other people to fight with them. So it couldn't be created from a vacuum, but it definitely is an artificial army. I don't know. I saw Patrol twice since I've been here, and I'm not into really violent movies. I don't get off on them, and I thought it was right on in sort of the hideousness, the awful aspects of war, and I see that in Nicaragua. I see that very same thing. It's the same type of thing, You read the reports in the paper. They have some village on the border. You got the Contras coming one day, and the Sandinistas coming the other day, and the people are just torn apart like crazy. The government can't run. One of the policies of the Contras which is so. You read what their targets are. Their targets are the coffee or any co-ops, anything that the Sandinistas have put together that's working becomes a target to destroy, because they do not want any success out of Nicaragua. So that's pretty discouraging for all that region, and it's a very large region. There's Latin America in general has problems economically. I mean, look at all the neighbors of Nicaragua and all of Latin America, and even a larger country like Brazil or Argentina and things like that, they have very big economic problems. So left alone, Nicaragua would have problems economically. I don't know how you contribute that, but there's a lot. I don't know what it is. It's sort of a mental attitude or the way they sort of do things. One thing the Sandinistas have done, they've cleaned up corruption. You don't hear of bribes, or the bribes are so small that they're minor, and they're usually very frowned upon if anybody interacts that way and so on. So I think they're honest. Another thing I noticed is that the family life is quite different. We have a isolated family condition where we divide our family. I know my family's all divided here, and yet down in Nicaragua it's always combined. They have an extended family. Everybody interacts, everybody's helping each other and so on. And under rather stressful conditions, this does very well, I think. I think it should be enacted as well here, but what I notice is that it works very well in terms of people taking care of themselves and helping each other and so on, and sharing the burden of, say, raising children and things like that. Sharing the task, not the burden. Any other questions? Yeah?
you as part of your political ambition to open up doors to the U.S. government, or would you be interested in getting involved at all with that, or not?
The Sandinista government using me.
Well, I mean, picture American army that's filling out big roads out in Nicaragua, you know what I'm saying? Sounds really good, and maybe you would like to be part of opening up more relations between the U.S. and Nicaragua. I know, I think that's right.
I definitely would be, and that's one of the reasons I gave this lecture tonight. I was talking to a Fulbright student that's been down there for about a year and a half, and he goes back to Seattle all the time. And I said, well, what do you do when you go back? And he says, well, I go to the radio station, I go to the universities, I talk, and I want to explain what's happening down there, because I think the general public in the U.S. is rather ignorant of it. And I said to myself, well, you know, I've been going down there for a year and a half, and I haven't even, except for my personal friends, I haven't talked to anybody. I think it needs to be explained. I think the media, I was talking to Rick Davison today, and he mentioned this astronomical figure. I can't remember. What was it, Rick? It was the amount of U.S. citizens that have gone down there in the last few years to help. What? 40,000 U.S. citizens go down there a year to help. And you see them all the time. I see them at the hotel. They're just like waves, you know. I eat all my meals at the hotel, so I get to see this wave of new crop, out in type of thing. And they come down and they're contributing their time, their energies. There's doctors, there's mechanics, there's agricultural experts, and on down the line. They want to help. They see an oppressed situation and they want to help. And so I don't think it's black and white. I don't think it's a situation where the U.S. wants to destroy. I think there's a big segment of the United States that wants to help. So if I can be classified in that category of wanting to help, I want to help, sure. And I wouldn't be mind going down and saying I'm helping. Okay. Any other? Yeah?
You remind me a lot of the Hong Kong project. You know, didn't show that on the screen.
What? Hong Kong?
The Hong Kong project. The terrace stairway and the river system.
It's got some, you know, crossovers definitely, but you know, if you look at the Hong Kong project, you know, the overall effect is quite different. But there's a sort of a system of design that's very similar, you know, I would say. Okay. In plan, see, they're just rectilinear rooms. I mean, it's like your standard hotel room. I mean, we're trying to make it as good as we can, but there's a whole category of when you design a hotel, a certain size room, certain size closet, and it's all established for you. And in plan, they just all fall into this cookie cutter. So, you know, you manipulate that, and this allows you to do that. And then the Hong Kong project with the modulation as well did that. Hey, you want to try me on something else? I might have some new tricks, Eric. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
I wanted to say that they really like to dance there, you know. They're all into salsa stuff. And my hips, something just doesn't work that way. They're not doing better. Thank you.